Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are globally. Welcome to today's webinar on migrating your Microsoft Windows workloads to AWS. This is Jonathan LaCour. I'm one of the presenters for the day. We're going to wait about 1 minute to give people time to join, and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started. So first, some logistics. You'll notice attachments and links. There are some really useful data sheets and case studies in there that you can download and peruse after the webinar. There's also a place in the interface for asking questions. We would love for you to start queuing up some questions as you have them. We'll hold those questions until the end, and then we'll make sure to walk through each question and do our best to answer them to the best of our ability. And with that, let's get started. The topic today is migrating your Microsoft Windows workloads to AWS and what you need to know. Quick introductions. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Mission. We'll talk a little bit about who we are in a moment. I also have Scott with us. Scott, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Goldberg, and I am a Solutions Architect at Mission.
Great. And a little bit about who we are at Mission. So we are a consulting and managed services provider with offices in Los Angeles and Boston. We're actually the combination of 3 former partners, and now we are a premier partner. We offer a comprehensive suite of services to help you architect, migrate, manage, and optimize for the cloud. And that means we can handle your entire journey to the cloud, from getting you ready to technology road mapping, POCs, best practices, through migrations, guided cloud transformations, implementation of CI/CD pipelines, managing and optimizing your environment once you're in AWS, including continuous DevOps consultation, optimization, cost optimization and attribution, application performance, and more. So we are a kind of a one-stop partner for AWS with customers around the world. We have over 110 certifications from AWS, and our engineering teams are 100% certified. As I mentioned, we are a premier consulting partner. That's the top tier of partner with AWS. We're also an MSP partner, and we have several competencies, including the DevOps competency, the healthcare and life sciences competencies as well. And we're a well-architected review launch partner. So 40+ engineers, and we're ready to help you with your cloud journey. So with that, let's talk a bit about Mission's experience with Microsoft Windows workloads on AWS. We actually have deep experience helping customers transform and modernize their Windows and Microsoft SQL workloads. We've migrated many customers with Windows applications and workloads to AWS. And we can actually help design and implement migration plans, re-architect you, optimize you for both spend and performance post-migration. Here's a list of some of the customers that we've worked with, including Boston Celtics, ATCC, VBO Tickets, and more. And I think to really get into the meat of the topic today, let's talk about why customers are choosing AWS specifically for Microsoft workloads. You know, as you are aware, there are multiple hyperscale cloud providers available on the market today, including Microsoft themselves. But when it comes to why customers are primarily choosing AWS for those workloads, it really comes down to this first section, the most experience. AWS has been running Windows workloads on their platform since the very beginning of their platform. So it's over 10 years of experience, hundreds of thousands of customers, and there's just no substitute for experience, right? Now, In addition, there's some great stats here that we were able to source from AWS. 400% between 2015 and 2018 growth of Windows workloads on AWS, and that's including EC2 and for Windows Server. That's incredible growth in kind of a short period of time, and actually, interestingly, that growth eclipses even the growth of Linux workloads on AWS. So you're seeing just this massive uptake in Windows workloads on AWS. In addition, people choose AWS for Windows workloads because of kind of the global reach and high availability of the public cloud with AWS specifically. AWS has more AZs and regions globally, and a big differentiator that many people aren't aware of compared to several of the other public clouds out there is that their availability zones are true availability zones. They're not within a single data center, generally speaking. They're real redundancy, true availability zones. And that's spanning 20 geographic regions. As an AWS partner, we are well aligned with them and talk to them a lot about their core values. And one of their most important core values is this customer obsession. AWS takes listening to customer feedback very seriously, and also partner feedback. And as we engage with Amazon and our customers engage with Amazon to build out their workloads on AWS, we have personally seen many instances where we have brought to them feedback, and that feedback has been actioned and resulted in real progress, innovation on the platform. So 140 plus service offerings. This slide is probably out of date as of 5 minutes ago, right? We're talking constant innovation from AWS. In addition, they have the deepest set of compliance certifications of any of the hyperscale public clouds, 50 plus certifications, HIPAA, FISMA, SOC 1 and 2, FIPS, ISO, and so on. And in addition, I think from a TCO perspective, it's going to be hard to beat AWS. They mention here that they've never raised prices, right? And they've done 61 price reductions, major price reductions since 2006. So we are constantly working with customers to take advantage of new capabilities that Amazon offers for cost optimization. So it's above and beyond just price reductions and having the best price point. They have a lot of different levers that you can push and pull to really optimize your environment, reduce your costs, and get the best TCO. So now let's look at a slide here that we actually pulled from AWS. This is a great kind of viewpoint into that 10 years of innovation for Windows on AWS. Now, AWS actually also highlights all their .NET and app modernization innovations on an additional slide like this, and this doesn't even include those. And you can see there's dozens of major, innovation points over the last 10 years that have really been focused on Windows, Windows Server, SQL Server, right? There are 143 instance types and 37 instance families for EC2 that actually are available for Windows workloads, and 60 different AMIs for Windows workloads. So they have a very deep capability set and kind of jumpstart really on all the other public clouds here. And AWS hosts nearly twice as many Windows Server instances in the cloud than even Microsoft does, which is, I think, a pretty incredible statistic. So let's look now at kind of migration options. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of look at migrations, and one of the classic ways to evaluate is sort of from a journey perspective, right? Lift and shift, which is to move your environment from your on-prem environment up into the cloud with little to no optimization or modification. That does get you onto AWS, gets you operational model, but it definitely does not give you the full benefit of going to the cloud, and in many cases it's not the right choice. It does depend on your organization. And then there's optimization, right? Once you're in the environment, in AWS, you can right size. In on-prem environments, you are building out your capacity based on peak demand, whereas in the cloud, you are able to align your resources with demand, and you're able to do that on demand. So right sizing implementing auto-scaling and elasticity. This is kind of the first stage of optimization, using things like reserved instances to save, and then using managed services like RDS rather than running your own SQL Server on an EC2 instance. That enables you to then also free yourself from sort of the licensing burden of maintaining your own license. The licensing is built right into your EC2 cost for Windows and your SQL Server cost for RDS. Finally, once you're there, you can fully modernize and refactor, right? That can be funded by the cost savings that you're already realizing. You can move to containers, serverless where possible and practical, and leverage even more managed services. So AWS here on this slide also talks about kind of the business drivers, right? So the strategy of rehosting, replatforming, or refactoring, those align very closely to what I just talked you through from a lift and shift optimization and modernization perspective. So if you are going to rehost and kind of in a lightweight way get to the cloud, you get deep familiarity, right? Full control, reliability. You're not changing a lot, but you are getting some of the initial experience of administration experience with AWS. You're getting full control over the environment, and you have full access to all the capabilities of SQL Server. But once you're there, if your business driver changes to really kind of getting a more optimized architecture, you can replatform, right? And that involves using things like Elastic Beanstalk, the directory service, and you can get a lot more automated patching and backups, proven high availability, as they mentioned here. And finally, full refactoring. And this is where you start to realize the full benefits of the public cloud. Full integration with the whole cloud ecosystem, major benefits to TCO. Licensing becomes a lot more transparent and on demand, and you have a lot of access to migration tooling and services with AWS. So now let's look at a specific use case, really, which is about SQL Server. We work a lot with customers who have, large SQL Server workloads, and they ask us about, well, wouldn't SQL Server run better on Azure versus AWS? And interestingly, if there was an independent, research firm called ZK Research, they did an extensive study last year on kind of performance and TCO for SQL Server on both AWS and Azure. And what they discovered is two things. So first, on the left here, you have a graph showing the cost per 1 billion transactions per month. So this is kind of a measure of the cost for performance. And on AWS, the price performance there is 2x, a little actually over 2x that you would get on Azure. And then here on the right-hand side, you can see the performance benefits. So many people think that instance types across different clouds that look the same are actually the same, but they're really not. It's a common misconception. When you benchmark and compare the actual performance of the different instance sizes, that price performance gap, the performance improvement gets even greater, right? So if you look at AWS's equivalent instance size, you actually are getting nearly 3x performance improvement. So AWS is really the best place in our view and in the independent view of ZK Research for running SQL Server workloads for performance, TCO, and overall. So finally, let's talk, before we jump into some case studies, let's talk about how Mission can actually help you. So because we are a partner of AWS, a premier partner, and because we have kind of the competencies that we have, the capabilities that we have, we are empowered by AWS with partner funding to actually accelerate your projects. And that means that AWS is motivated to win your business and to get you from your on-prem environment into AWS. In order to help accelerate those, they will engage with a partner like Mission and actually fund significant portions of the project to migrate you from on-prem to AWS or from another cloud to AWS. They will also fund things like proof of concept. So if you're wanting to test would perform within AWS, that can be a funded project. Windows-specific workloads have specific funding programs that we can participate in. So definitely get in touch and we can talk you through those. And finally, there are significant kind of credits available around database migrations and database projects. So if we're moving from on-prem to RDS or you're moving to Aurora, which is Amazon's kind of next generation cloud native relational database platform. So there's lots of ways we can help. Definitely feel free to reach out. Some of the attachments and links that we've included there on data sheets and such will help you with that. And you can also go to missioncloud.com to reach out to our team, and we can definitely talk you through that. But I think at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Scott, and I'm going to let him talk you through a couple of case studies that can show you kind of the real world benefits of Mission's engagement with Windows workload customers.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'm going to go over a couple of case studies here today. The first case study I want to talk about is VBO Tickets. So VBO Tickets provides an online software platform that enables event producers to create, manage, and sell tickets online. In order to support a rapidly growing customer base, VBO identified the need to design and implement their next-gen architecture, and they engaged Mission to do so. The crux of their issues was that the environment just wasn't designed for scalability, and traffic spikes were causing intermittent downtime for their customers. VBO's main application was running on a single, albeit large, Windows Server instance that also had the database running alongside it. Furthermore, the versions of Windows and SQL Server were nearing their end of life and were about to become out of support. So the company was in need of an architecture that would scale to meet their variable traffic requirements, as well as the ability for them to develop and deploy new functionality in the quickest manner possible. For the solution, Mission designed a completely new architecture using auto-scaling and load balancing that would allow VBO to scale the environment up and down accordingly with demand. This allowed the company to insulate itself from the variable traffic spikes that are common to its business. We were able to decouple the database from the application and migrate it to RDS while upgrading both Windows and SQL Server to the latest versions at the time. Additionally, an entirely new CI/CD pipeline was created using Jenkins, PowerShell scripts, and Git to manage automated releases and pave the way for a blue-green deployment model where downtime could be minimized and the rollback process simplified. There were a few issues along the way. The application configuration did not support load balancing in its pre-existing form, but we were able to work with the developers to implement the changes required for doing so. The company at the time was also not familiar with Git. Mission introduced the concept of source code version control, which streamlined collaboration among VBO's developers and laid the groundwork for their automated deployment pipeline. Finally, as code was previously being pushed, Mission implemented a non-production environment that developers could use to stage their releases and perform adequate testing against before pushing their changes to production. The next case study I have for you guys is for ATCC's data center migration to AWS. ATCC maintains the largest and most diverse collection of biological materials in the world. After years of being hosted at the same provider, ATCC was notified that the data center would be discontinuing its operations. This started the clock on a race to migrate the entirety of their infrastructure out of the data center and into their new home, which was to be AWS.
Sounds like Scott might be having a technical difficulty here. So until he gets reconnected, I'm going to kind of pick up where he left off, talk a little bit about the challenge that ATCC experienced. So as we mentioned, they were hosted in a data center, and they were given a 3-month notice that their provider would be shutting down. Right? This is never a fun circumstance for anyone. And they could afford zero downtime, basically, right? Because that's a huge portion of their business was their e-commerce site, and they had a huge effort ahead, so they engaged with Mission. And I think Scott is reconnected, and I'm going to let him walk through the solution.
Yeah, so sorry about that, guys. The solution to their accelerated timeline was that we elected to leverage Cloud Endure, which hadn't actually been purchased by AWS yet, to migrate those servers while also providing continuous disaster recovery services post-migration. So using that tool, Mission was able to migrate APCC's entire environment in a single day, albeit after several trial runs, I'll say. The single day migration allowed us the time post-migration to troubleshoot any lingering issues and actually fine-tune and dial in performance. In the end, ATCC was able to continue its e-commerce operations with 0 unplanned interruptions in service. There were a few issues that we ran into during this project, and there's really only one major one. During the first attempts to migrate some of the servers, we found that some of them would not boot afterwards. We found that this was due to an issue with Windows Server at the time, where if the instance could not find the previously attached domain controller on boot, that it would prevent the instance from booting altogether. Once we figured out the proper order to perform the migration in, the rest of the instances were able to boot smoothly. Lastly, I want to say that cleanup is king post-migration. With all of the test environments that were launched in the process, it's important to terminate any unused environments, volumes, and AMIs, as well as to make sure to lock down any security groups that might have been widened during the process. This is just a PSA to wrap things up that end of support is coming and has already come in some cases. SQL Server 2008 reached its end of life in July of this year, and Windows Server 2008 will be reaching that point in the first couple weeks of January 2020. Mission works with customers who need to upgrade and or modernize their infrastructure all the time and can help you work through any licensing ramifications for doing so. Please reach out to us if you have any questions about migrating to the newest Microsoft software versions, or if there's anything else you might need assistance with on your cloud journey. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. I believe we have some time now to take questions, so please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as we can.
Great, thanks, Scott. And I definitely see some questions starting to roll in.
Okay, it looks like the first question is there a grace period for end of support? So there actually is, and we're in it today. So the end of support that we're referring to is the end of extended support. So in the case of SQL Server, that extended support has run out already. So I would urge you to look into migrating to newer versions as soon as possible, because it just means that you're not going to be receiving any more Windows critical and important security updates and patches. And that extended support window for Windows Server 2008, like I said, it will be running out on January 14th, 2020. So there really is no more grace period after that.
Great, and I see another question coming in here. It says, in your experience, does migrating your Windows workloads to AWS lead to cost savings, to greater cost savings in the short term, the long term, or both? And, I think Scott and I can both chime in on this one. The answer is both. But I would say to really fully maximize your cost savings, we talked about some of those things during that kind of migration slide earlier. There's a lot of features and capabilities in AWS that you can take advantage of to lead to greater cost savings, and that includes everything from sort of financial optimization type mechanisms like reserved instances, where you can perform commits against your infrastructure and optionally even pay up front some or part of the cost for your compute to drive down cost for significant savings. Mission does quite a bit of work with customers on reserved instance optimization. We actually have some for companies who are looking to save in AWS. So if that is something you're interested in, especially if you are, unsure of how to make those commitments or whether or not you should actually put up any capital or have capital to front on that for those reserved instances, we can definitely help with that. But above and beyond those kind of traditional, or not even traditional necessarily, but non-technical, mechanisms to get cost savings, there's also re-architecture that can be done in your environment, and right sizing, right, to ensure that you're using auto scaling, you're mapping your usage to your demand, and getting that alignment, that curve really tightly mapped is where you're going to see the most savings. And also taking advantage of things like serverless, right, and managed services. Scott, in your experience, what are some other kind of key factors there?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, the last biggest thing I was definitely going to say is taking advantage of Windows containers, which are fairly new, but a significant way to cut down costs from running, those traditional instances. Aside from that, I guess I just want to point out that obviously every customer's use case is different, and so that's why I'd sort of urge you to reach out to a partner like Mission or even AWS themselves, so that you can get more of a customized, tailored insight into what it will look like to actually migrate your specific Windows workloads to AWS.
Great, thanks, Scott. And I see one more question coming in here, and it's related to Cloud Endure, which is the tool that we used for ATCC. And interestingly, Scott did bring it up. Cloud Endure was actually purchased by AWS, so it's actually part of the AWS family now, which has been really a wonderful thing. And what it provides is pretty interesting. So I find the ATCC kind of case study particularly cool because of that, zero downtime kind of migration we were able to perform. And that was really enabled by Cloud Endure's ability to do kind of block level streaming of data. It's a pretty incredible tool, and as an AWS partner, we do get access to that tool to help kind of drive those migrations. And I am seeing a couple more questions around partner funding, and I would definitely advise, if you are interested in leveraging that funding to get your migration performed for little to no cost to you, definitely do reach out. It really does depend. It is very customer specific. But, we have a great program called SA on Demand, and we can, get some time with you, the customer, to sit down in front of a smart SA like Scott or someone smarter than Scott, just kidding, for about an hour to really go through your use case and, what you're looking to achieve. And we can come back to you and give you kind of detailed feedback and input on what it would take, what programs are available, and how Mission can help. And with that, I believe we have answered all of the questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and we really do appreciate the engagement. Looking forward to working with you all, and as a reminder, there are attachments and links available for you, including the PDFs for each of the case studies that we reviewed today. There's a data sheet on AWS migrations, specifically around SQL Server and Windows Server. And I would also encourage you to visit our website at missioncloud.com. There we have a library of dozens of case studies just like these two that we went through today, talking about a huge variety of other kind of workloads and things that we're capable of doing. So we look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for joining us today.